Great. So I welcome you all for this afternoon session. And as you all aware, today's session is on our invoice management system. This is basically a new functionality which is live from October, and it has been introduced by the GST systems. So this entire session will be on the modalities and the usage of this new technology. Yeah, and I welcome you all again. So we are starting now. Yeah, so invoice management system or called as IMS system. It is basically has been introduced or maybe applicable from October 1st October 2024, and it has been made applicable on a optional basis, meaning it is not made that or it is not made mandatory for the users now. Yeah, so let's go. Now, before we get into the IMS system, I want to give some background about some background. Yeah. So, this IMS system was basically introduced to to bring in the more stringency or more responsibility on both the ends, that is from the supplier side also and the recipient side also. And as we have been seeing that from July 2017, government has been introducing various different new kinds of functionalities or systems to ensure that there is a seamless flow of credit, number one. And number two, lot of technology has been built around to ensure that the credits flow smoothly. Like for example, like if you see from 2017, right? There was or after introduction of GST, they had introduced GSTR 2A. Although they had planned to bring GSTR 2 and GSTR 3, right? The systems which actually never came in, but and then they came up with a new return X, and they had their own functionalities. Those also did not come in for various practical reasons. But from 2017 till today, we have seen the e-invoicing, and they have introduced a system called capping on the ITC. Then they made in Jan 22 GSTR to be mandatory, right? So that's how the ITC or how the journey of an ITC had been over the years. Now, this is just a broad outlook of how a GST return works, right? So as part of GST filing process, a vendor would file GSTR1, and these are the broad timelines which I've just mentioned for as an example, right? And vendor will file its GSTR1, right? Then we as a customer or a recipient, right, would do a reconciliation based on the records. When I say records, please understand the records mean the invoices, that particular invoice, right? So it is termed as a record. So a record would appear in GSTR 2A before it was GSTR 2A. So from Jan 22, it has become GSTR 2B, based on which we have to avail credit in GSTR 3B. Now they have also introduced a new form called GSTR 1A, right? Which is applicable from September onwards. GSTR 1A is basically a form which is used for doing any amendment after filing your GSTR 1, right? So before any customer files his GSTR 3B, if the vendor gets to know there are certain changes which need to be done in a particular invoice, he can do this through GSTR 1A. And final step would be filing of GSTR, final step would be payment of tax in GSTR 3B. Then what were the challenges? There were a lot of, these challenges actually made GSTN to think of bringing these kinds of systems. Now, what were these challenges? A couple of challenges were like claiming of credit and reversals. Then there were no transaction level details available before at the vendor level end. As a recipient, I know what are the details available because I'm the recipient of the invoices, and GSTR 2B was the detail available. But there was no mechanism for me to communicate on GST through GST portal to a vendor, right? Then there were lot of notices issued, right? Because of the data which was available in the dashboard of a GST department and data available in our as a user were different, which led to presumptive notices, right? And then detailed verification of this 3B was not possible because your 3B was going as a whole number. Now, seeing all these challenges, government felt they need to introduce, lot of systems around. Now, what are the systems? If you see the systems, first they introduced ITC reclaim ledger. Now, this ITC reclaim ledger was introduced in August 2023, where whatever your ITC which were not allowed or which were not availed in your GSTR 3B and were kept pending, right? Government wanted to know what is that amount. That is your ITC reclaim ledger, and how and when and how much have you reclaimed out of that pending ITC which you have not availed. Then second, they introduced recently your GSTR 1A, right? As I said earlier, GSTR 1A is a form for making changes after filing GSTR 1 and before filing 3B. Then now they have introduced RCM ledger in August 24, where they wanted to know what is RCM paid and what is RCM credit availed, a difference of this. Then recently they have also introduced negative liability ledger. Now, what is this negative liability ledger? There was a scenario that in GSTR 3B negative values were not allowed, right? Now, after introducing this negative liability ledger, what happens after filing GSTR 1, assuming there is a negative value, meaning a negative value can happen only in a scenario where the credit note value is more than the invoice for a month. In that case, the 3B gets auto-populated with a negative value, right? And the negative liability ledger also, there's an entry gets posted in this ledger for a particular month, saying this was the negative value, so that in subsequent month, whenever there's a positive value, it will automatically offset with that positive value. That is your negative liability ledger. And it is already effective from September 2024. Then finally, now today's our session is all about invoice management system, which is already introduced from 1st October 2024. And I know lot of users are not able to see in your dashboard, but very soon it is coming after 14th October. Now, when we see all this kind of different kinds of functionalities being introduced in GST, right? Where are we leading to, right? What we can see, right? Where we are heading towards is an auto-populated and a non-editable GSTR 3B. Finally, when a 3B gets auto-populated with all the numbers, it should be a non-editable one. And the only step which should be is for the next step is to take forward for payment. So this is very important. Then what is an invoice management system? And just to tell you everyone, this is a 60-minute session. We will try to close it within time, maybe a 5 minutes, even if it may spill over. Then what's an invoice management system? It's a new feature which is on the GST portal to allow recipient taxpayer. Now they have introduced this functionality. I want everyone to pay attention. They have introduced this functionality for a recipient taxpayers to accept, reject, or keep any invoice pending. Now, I'll just explain my further slides also. Now, there can be a mismatch. As I told earlier, there were mismatches between GSTR 2B, the invoice appearing in GSTR 2B, and an invoice which was submitted by the vendor in hard copy. Many times there were differences, but there was no system of communication on the GST portal. Right now, this IMS is introduced to solve this issue of, and it has made more interaction between the supplier and a recipient at an invoice level. Now, if there are mismatches with invoices filed by supplier and returns submitted by recipient, are significant issues taxpayer face when claiming input tax credit. Many times we are seeing that, as I told earlier, a lot of issues have been faced by the suppliers and recipient also while claiming the ITC. Now, the key feature will be it is a real-time compliance, seamless integration with e-invoice, and efficient ITC management. Now, what are the functionalities of the IMS? Broad functionalities. Number one, it has allowed the recipient to accept an invoice. An invoice can be accepted The moment an invoice is accepted on the GST portal through an IMS system, it will come and sit in your GSTR 2B until unless it will not get auto-populated in your 2B. And then that credit will be available in your GSTR 3B. Number two, rejecting an invoice. Assuming that invoice values are not correct, or maybe the invoice does not belong to you and erroneously be filed on your GSTIN, you can reject that invoice and it will not come and sit in your 2B anywhere. Finally, pending invoice. Assuming you want to keep that invoice pending for various reasons, assuming the service, the goods are still in transit, or for whatever reason the discussion is still going on, but the invoice has been issued, you can keep it under a pending option. There's an option called pending invoice, right? But whenever you keep this under pending, right, it will be deemed to be accepted if you don't take any action after a point of time. Let's see further. Now, how does now this entire IMS is based on an invoice, right? Invoice filed by the supplier through his GSTR 1A or IFF. This is mainly for a supplier who is filing or for whom e-invoicing is not applicable. And for the suppliers for whom e-invoicing is applicable, it will get auto-populated from the whatever e-invoices are filed month on month, day on day. So what will happen whenever an e-invoice is filed, right? It will come and sit in your invoice management system as a saved record. It will not be you can take an action on it, but it will not flow to your GSTR 2B. So what will happen? The record will come to your invoice management system. You may say accept, reject, or no action or pending. These are the options which are provided on the GST portal for every record. I will also be showing you how does it look on a GST portal system. We have taken through every step of the IMS in our further slides. Now, this is the system which I was telling that it has brought in an interactive system between the recipient and the vendor, right? So for example, you can accept a particular invoice, or you can also reject, saying this invoice is erroneous, or the numbers are not what the invoice says. So in that situation, you are also allowed to reject an invoice. So let us see in every scenario what happens when an invoice gets accepted or invoice gets rejected from both supplier and from both supplier and recipient perspective. Now, what happens if an invoice are accepted? The moment you click on an invoice on IMS as accepted, right, the ITC will be available in your 2B, right? If you remember the GSTR 2B, it is a preliminary view. It says first it says ITC available and it says ITC not available. So whatever invoices you accept on the portal of IMS, it will come and sit in your GSTR 2B. Right? And it will get automatically flown to your 3B also based on the whatever you have accepted the invoice. If you take no action on these invoices, or if assuming you click on no action, then it will be deemed to be accepted and all the records will come in 2B. Now there are a lot of questions that should we mandatorily follow? Should we? Is it an additional compliance which we have to do? Please understand this is a optional now, but it will become mandatory, as we have seen how it has been for GSTR 2B also. Any system newly introduced, it will be made optional, but in this optional period is the right time for us to learn the new system, right? So maybe we have to start playing around with this and see how the impact flows to your GSTR 2B and 3B. Then same, when if you reject a particular invoice, it will go and sit. You'll see a particular tab called ITC rejected in section in 2B also. So whatever you have rejected, right, these invoices will go and sit in your GSTR 2B section as ITC rejected, and these will not auto-populate in your GSTR 3B. So before what we used to observe, all the invoices which are appearing in 2B would get auto-populated to 4A5 in your GSTR 3B. Now what will happen? Whatever invoices you accept only will flow in GSTR 2B, and from GSTR 2B it will flow to your GSTR 3B 4A5. Right? Then if the recipient rejects the invoice after the supplier files, now now a scenario can happen that you get it is a real-time basis where you can accept invoice every day basis also. It need not be after a next month after 14th, right? You can start accepting your invoice day in, day out, every day, whenever the invoice gets populated, right? In the IMS portal, right? Then if you reject any invoice, what would happen? Assuming a invoice is rejected before filing the GSTR1 of the vendor, right? He will do a correction and again he will resubmit. That will come and sit in your IMS again, and there again you can take an action for accepting or rejecting again. Then any invoice which is marked as pending. Now, what will happen when invoices are marked pending? It will not be included in your 2B or 3B. It will remain in your IMS system till the 16/4 timeline. What is the 16/4 timeline? That is your 30th November of the next subsequent period. Till that period, the invoice will remain in your IMS. After the 30th November, all the invoices will get auto accepted or it will be removed. Sorry, not auto accepted, my bad. All those records will be removed from the IMS and you cannot take any action on those. So very important to remember this timeline. And you cannot avail ITC on these pending, whichever invoices you mark pending, you will not be able to avail ITC on these invoices. Then please remember, whatever criteria you have set for the original invoice, same criteria will be applicable for the credit notes also. If you have rejected the original invoice, right, and the credit note for that also you will not be allowed to reject. It will also get accepted. And if you have accepted the original credit note, then you cannot reject the amended credit note. It will get deemed accepted. That because you have already accepted the credit note, if there is any upward or downward revision in the credit note, you will have to accept it. There is no possibility of you rejecting that amendment. And what happens whenever any amendment happens to the credit notes or invoice, it will straight away impact the vendor GSTR1 first, and then it's GSTR3B liability. Whatever you assume a credit note is raised, right? And if you reject it, it will go and sit in supplier's liability. Moving forward. Now, what we have done is every scenario, what would be the for every step of acceptance, right? Rejection or pending, what are the various impact we have just quickly captured here. Now, the slide says what is the impact on acceptance of an invoice on supplier and recipient. Now, let us see if a particular now this is applicable for B2B, debit note and e-commerce 95 services. For these services only will get auto-populated in your invoice management system. Now, what will happen whenever an invoice is accepted? For the recipient, it will go and sit in his ITC, assuming a full amount. Assuming he accepts it, then full amount of ITC he will get in his GSTR 2B, and that amount will go and sit in his 3B. Now, after accepting the invoice, that is the first step which I have just shown here. After accepting the invoice for full amount, assuming the vendor or the supplier does a upward revision in the invoice or there's an amendment in the invoice after accepting also, can he still do the amendment? Yes, very well. He can do the amendment on the invoice. If it's an upward amendment in the invoice, then delta will be available. When I say delta, assuming the invoice value was 100 before when you accepted it, and now the invoice has been revised to 110, that the differential 10 will be available as ITC for the recipient. And similarly for the downward amendment, whenever there's any change, that differential delta, which is 10, assuming it was before 100, now the supplier has made it 90. The delta of -10 will get automatically reduced from your ITC. Right? So that is from the recipient perspective. Now from the supplier perspective, whenever he raises an e-invoice or pushes an invoice through GSTR1 or 1A or through IFF, it will be a full liability for him in his GSTR3B. Or if he does any amendment post filing his GSTR1 in GSTR1A, if he does any amendment, that will sit or the delta or the differential will come and sit in his GSTR 3B as liability. And similarly for GSTR, similarly for downward amendment also. Now, I hope everyone is with me because I'm not able to see anyone. If you have any doubt, you can keep posting those. You can keep writing the messages. I will definitely attend to all your questions at last. Right. So moving forward. So this is about what is the impact on the after accepting an invoice, right, on the IMS portal. Then what happens to an invoice which is rejected? Now, similarly, a B2B or a debit note or an e-commerce 95 service invoice, whenever it is rejected by the recipient, right? Anyways, the moment he rejects it, he cannot take the credit. That's why the invoice ITC, it is nil for him. And since he has already rejected the invoice, the main invoice itself he has rejected, then there will not be any impact on his ITC because of the upward or downward revision of the invoice. So this is very important for everyone to note. If you reject any invoice, there will not be any impact on your ITC. But is there any impact on supplier? No, there is no impact because he has himself uploaded that invoice, right? It will the complete amount will go and sit as a liability in his GSTR 1 and 3B for payment. And whatever upward or downward revision he does will have the similar impact based on the full value of invoice what he has uploaded. So supplier will have to discharge his liability based on whatever invoice he uploads, because it's always remember the first step is done by the supplier. He will upload the invoice either through e-invoicing platform or through his GSTR 1 or 1A and IFF. Assuming even if recipient rejects that invoice, it will have zero impact on the supplier's liability. Yeah. Moving forward. Then what is the impact of pending status of invoice on supplier and recipient? Now, as I will show in my further slides, how a system looks or how can you keep an invoice pending? And now we are seeing now I'm just taking you to the impact of it. Assuming you keep you checkbox saying the invoice has to be kept pending, then for recipient there is no impact on the ITC because you have kept it pending and neither you have accepted nor rejected. But for supplier, it is same. Whatever invoices he has uploaded, it is full value or whatever the changes he has done, upward or downward revision of invoice, right? That delta will have an impact on his liability, but keeping any invoice pending will not have any impact on the supplier. Moving forward. Now, exactly same thing happens for the credit notes also. Assuming a credit note is accepted for the recipient, then it is very obvious, assuming there is an invoice which you had accepted first. That's why I've mentioned as invoice minus amount, because you had accepted the invoice first. Earlier you had accepted the invoice. Now this credit note will also be accepted. Then it will reduce your ITC. Now one question here is, how do we know this credit note is raised for which invoice? Since because of various representation from industry previously, they have removed this option of tagging the credit note with a particular invoice. Now, whether they will introduce again, we don't know. But after seeing this mechanism, we are of the view that the invoice tagging with a particular credit note is required now. Until unless if the invoice tagging happens for a particular credit note, you will not be able to understand this credit note has been raised for which particular invoice. Right? So whatever credit notes are accepted based on the invoice which you have accepted previously, the upward and downward revision will also have similar impact of the credit notes. And assuming if you reject a credit note, this is an accepted scenario. Whatever you accept, the credit note will also impact the supplier liability. The credit note is accepted, and anyways his liability is gonna reduce because of this credit note impact. Similar impact of the downward and upward revision. If the credit note value is increasing, what do you mean by upward amendment? A credit note of value 100, which you have filed. Later on, you realized it had to be not 100, but 110. Then it will be called an upward amendment. And downward amendment would be you had to give a credit note only for 90, but you gave for 100. that is your downward amendment, and the delta is that -10, right? I hope I am not too fast. Right. Then impact of rejecting an invoice rejecting a credit note. Now, what will be the impact of rejecting a credit note? There is a credit note which is issued by the supplier. It is coming and sitting in your invoice management system, and you have taken an action of rejecting that credit note. As a recipient, I will not have any impact because I have rejected the invoice, right? And the credit note also I am rejecting. Hence, there is no impact on my ITC ledger. Similar impact would be on the upward and downward amendment of the credit note also. So for the recipient, on rejecting a credit note, there will not be any impact because invoice was not accepted earlier. Then, if a credit note is rejected, then for supplier liability, it makes no change because he has filed the credit note. He will get the full, he can reverse the ITC to the extent of that credit note. And similarly will be the amendment of the, the impact of the amendment on these credit notes. I hope I'm clear till here. Does anyone have any doubt? Please start writing your questions on the chat box so that we will take up all your questions at last. Then credit notes. So this we have seen what happens to the when a credit note is rejected from the supplier perspective and also from the recipient perspective. Now, what happens when we keep a credit note under pending, assuming we don't know for what reason a credit note has been raised, right? Then even if you don't know and you are not allowed to keep, when I say NA here means not allowed, not applicable. NA here means you are not allowed to keep a credit note under pending. Either you have to accept it or reject it, but you're not allowed to keep under pending, right? So whatever may be the impact, credit note cannot be kept under the pending tab. Next. Now, finally, there can also be a situation where the invoice which we have raised earlier, right? Now it has to be raised on it. We actually had raised a RCM invoice. Now we need to change it from RCM to FCM invoice, meaning we had raised erroneously an RCM invoice. Now we need to raise a FCM invoice. Now, since it's an FCM invoice, right? The recipient will accept that invoice. Now, based on what the recipient accepts, it will go and sit in his ITC. And similarly, it will be for the supplier. Whatever will be the supplier liability, it will go and sit in his 3B for payment. Similarly, happened for rejecting. No, but the liability continues to be there for the supplier because he has already raised the invoice after amending it from RCM to FCM. FCM is forward charge mechanism and RCM is your reverse charge mechanism. Now, whatever the supplier liability is there, the full amount will be required to be paid by the supplier. Now, pending it is not, as I said earlier, recipient, if it is kept pending of ITC, it will remain till 30th November of the subsequent period. Till that time, if it doesn't take any action, it will get rejected. Sorry, not rejected, it will get away, it will go out of the IMS system. After that, he will not be allowed to take any action. Assuming even he wants to accept, he will not be allowed. Then similarly will be the impact of the credit note when there is a change happening from us, when there is a credit note which was issued erroneously under an RCM mechanism instead of an FCM. The impact have been shown very clearly in this chart. Whenever a credit note is accepted, for recipient, it will reduce the full ITC based on the credit note what he has accepted. and for the supplier also the liability will be reduced. Because earlier the supplier has paid the amount. Now because of this credit note change, the liability will get reduced. Now, when the invoice is rejected on ITC there will not be any issue for the recipient because he has rejected the invoice. So hence there will be no impact on the rejected invoice. Now, for pending, you are not allowed to keep any credit note pending because as I said earlier, you are not allowed to keep any item as pending for an amended invoice credit note. You are not allowed to keep anything pending or a credit note which is raised. Going further, same will be in case where from RCM to from FCM to RCM, assuming you had raised an invoice under FCM, but later on you realize it was erroneously raised as FCM, but need to be raised as RCM. Now, interestingly, what it will happen here is it will go and sit in recipient IMS, right? And as a full amount. But as I told earlier, RCM invoices will not get auto-populated in IMS system. Right? So this amendment will have an impact because it will reduce your ITC, but it will also go and sit in your liability ledger of in 3B. I hope you are following. And for supplier, it will reduce the amount because earlier he had issued an FCM invoice and now he's issuing the RCM invoice. Because of that, he had made a payment of the liability earlier. Now this change will decrease his liability. That's why I said minus full amount, right? And the impact of reject and pending is similarly been shown here. Now, this scenario is for a credit note from FCM to RCM. Now, I don't want you to get confused when I talk of credit note from RCM to FCM. Whatever is the ultimate invoice which is raised, assuming it is raised, a credit note is raised for an RCM invoice now, impact will be based on that only. Now, whatever RCM invoice credit note you have raised, right, it will go and reduce the liability of the recipient. That's why I mentioned as minus full amount will be the liability which will be reduced in the recipient 3B, and ITC also will have to be reduced. Similarly will be the rejection case. If a if a credit note is raised, recipient can reject the credit note. On rejection, it will have no impact on the recipient ITC and liability. But for the supplier, a full amount of liability will get reduced from his 3B. Similarly, for the pending, you're not allowed to keep pending. So whatever accept reject you do, that will be the impact on in the 3B. Now, till here we have covered all the maximum possible scenarios, whatever they could have arisen in an IMS system. Now, whatever you have seen till now are all based on the GST manual, which is released by the GST portal. Number 2, FAQs, which they have released, right? And after discussing with the various industry people around the technology, we have prepared all this simulations for you to see what happens on a particular action. Now, where will this IMS be available? IMS system will be available in your service tab under returns as a invoice management system dashboard. This will be the functionality which will be introduced. For many of them, it has already come in. For many, it would not have come. Do not worry. System is taking its own time. It will come. Let's wait till 14 is what they have said. Now, as soon as you click on invoice management system dashboard, the next tab will be, you can see IMS for an inward supplies. This is for the recipient, and IMS for the outward supplies. This is for the supplier. Now, this is the interactive dashboard which I was saying. Based on whatever action is taken by the recipient, right? The outward supplies of the supplier will get auto-populated with those records based on those actions. Then after clicking on invert supplies, right? It says records where no action is taken by taxpayer will be considered. This is just an information purpose. The moment you say view, all your records will be getting auto-populated in this form. See, it says all other ITC, right? Now, in this all other ITC, there will be all these headings will be appearing. B2B invoice, B2B invoice amendment, debit note, amended debit note, credit note, amended credit note, and ECO invoices. All this is the dashboard of the, and this is the count of the invoices. Now to start with, this is the categorization which I was discussing earlier. This is how it would look. How would accepted, these are this is the count of accepted, rejected, pending invoices, and no action invoices. Now these all are hyperlinked. The moment you want to get into any kind of section, you have to click on this and you will be able to get inside that particular kind of heading, which is B2B or debit notes. Now, important points I mentioned here. Summary numbers are also hyperlinks and taxpayer can click to view the respective returns. Then by default, all records will come under no action. Now, before even if you take any action after in IMS, all records will get auto-populated under no action column. After you take respective action of accept, reject, and pending, right? It will get bifurcated based on the action which you have taken. Next. Now, once you click on this particular kind, right? Now we'll see how how an invoice auto-population happens. Now, the next step, if you see, you can search a particular invoice based on the GSTIN also. Meaning, if you want to take action on a particular GSTIN level, you can also take particular GSTIN level. And you have various, can you see, various columns available, accept, reject, pending. Now, whatever action you would have taken, you would have ticked, right? That would be the status. At last, can you see there is accepted, rejected. This will be the status shown on this particular invoice. Now the question is, can I change this after? Can I accept can I reject an invoice after accepting? Yes, you can. Till the filing of your GSTR 3B, you can do n number of changes on a particular invoice status. And what happens to 2B? That I will show you. After you change your action, after accepting, you can reject. But what happens to 2B? Let us see next step. So this is what I was telling. You can also do a particular GSTIN level or an invoice level bulk action also you can take. Now these are just what is the meaning A, R, and all this accepted, pending, and rejected. But after doing anything, you should not forget to save it. If you see on the right bottom, there is an option called save. Now whatever action you take, say accept, reject, or whatever changes you do, you must not forget to save this. Right? This is more about bulk. I was telling you, right? You can bulk select the invoices. You need not do one by one. You can do a bulk selection and bulk rejection also. Now, after any action, do not forget to click save. You have to click save and save all those records, whatever the action you have taken. Now, after you do various action on the IMS table, this how the left side of the dashboard would look, right? Now, after saving that and after you coming out to this table on the dashboard, you have to give compute. There is an option called compute GSTR 2B, meaning whatever action you take in IMS portal, those records based on the action will flow in your 2B, right? Now, as we all know, 2B gets generated on 14th. Now, you come to IMS, do whatever action you have to do, and finally you give compute. Based on this compute, the 2B will get generated, or the 2B number will change based on this compute 2B. Now, the next question is, can I come? How many times can I do? I can do n number of times changes before filing my 3B. Now, will these records remain in IMS? After filing 3B, all these accepted and rejected records will go away. So you have opportunity to make changes till you file your 3B. Yes. Now, on clicking compute 2B, your 2B will get auto-generated. Now, the second component is outward supply. Similarly, will be you have to select financial, and maybe you have to start doing the changes based on the recipient, whatever they have uh, marked as, meaning assuming if they have rejected, it will come and sit in your GSTR 1 or 1A for your amendment if it is required. Assuming you feel there is no amendment required, you can refile it. And if there are any changes required, then you have to do that amendment in GSTR 1A. Now, this is just the dashboard of how it looks for an outward supply. Can view and download. Now you can actually view at invoice level whatever changes have been told, right? And this is the how a supplier IMS looks. You can generate, you can download and find out which our invoice has been rejected and take a action on that. Now, this was the broad outline on how an IMS looks. What are the features available for recipient and supplier? What was the purpose of introducing of IMS? As of now, it is optional. As of now, it is optional, and it is not made mandatory, but it will be very soon mandatory, will be made mandatory based on once the system settles down. So maybe a good time for all of us to play, understand these systems, because after, and as we have very well seen, Jan being the favorite month of introduction, we are expecting from Jan 2025 it to be made mandatory. It has not come out anywhere. This is just based on our previous experiences when they have introduced various new systems, right? Now we will be opening up the session for Q&A. So whoever has any doubt may raise their hand, and we will address every issue. There are a lot of questions which have already started coming in. Maybe I'll start reading those, and maybe anyone who wants to ask can also raise their hand. Atul sir has asked that what happens if we don't take any action? Will the GST to be generated like September? 100%. Assuming you are a person who decide, I want to first understand how the system behaves, and you refrain from taking any action, like neither accept, neither reject. You just remain as if there is no IMS at all for you, right? Then on 14th, you will get your 2B with auto acceptance of all the invoices. You continue to file your 3B and do your reconciliation of 2B as you were doing for August. Then, okay, if there is any amendment delta, will the liability reflect in next month filing? Now, if you reject, right, and if the before supplier filing 3B, it will go and sit in his 3B. If he has filed his 3B, then it has to be taken up in the next month. Priyanka, that was your doubt. So if anyone has any doubt, can raise their hand, and we will be able to. Now, the next question which has come in here is, what happens in the 3B? Now, whether if we have kept the records, but we have not, we have kept under, we have accepted and rejected as a action we have taken. What happens to those records? Those records will get removed from the IMS after filing your GSTR 3B for a particular month. Now, will IMS ease a reconciliation process during GSTR 9 and 9C? 100%, because what records you're taking to 2B, right? That itself will reflect in your 3B, and that will be the basis on which GSTR table 8A also will get auto-populated in your GSTR 9C, in your GSTR 9. Siddharaju, after accept only invoice come and sit in GSTR 2B. Need not be Siddharaju. See, you have an option. As of now, it's an optional. Assuming you want to exercise that option, right? And you click on accept, it will come and sit in your 2B. And from that 2B, it will flow to your 3B, 4A5. But assuming you're not, you sit and, I mean, not sit, you don't want to take any action on any of the records. As I said earlier, it will get auto accepted and all the records will flow to your 2B and you continue to do your your GSTR 2B reconciliation and park the invoices which does not belong to you in your temporary reversals. In first month, IMS will pick the invoices dated for September onwards or not before. Please confirm. Good question, sir. Now, according to our understanding and what we have discussed, IMS will start flowing the information of the invoices from 1st October 2024 onwards. It should not have any impact of the September invoices raised in September. The next question is whether will there be any impact on the RCM invoices? No, RCM invoices will not flow to your IMS portal. There is one more question. What happens to the amendment done in GSTR 1A? Now, whatever amendment is done in GSTR 1A, will I receive back that invoice? 100% assuming after filing GSTR 1 on 11th, right? You got an invoice auto-populated, you rejected that invoice. Vendor will have the option to amend the invoice in GSTR 1A. After filing 1A, it will again come back and sit in your IMS for your action of accepting and rejecting. And based on that, the credit will flow in your 2B. And from 2B, it will flow through your 3B in the same month. But you will have to do compute 2B because assuming you have already generated a 2B, right? And after generating a 2B, there are certain invoices after correction has come back to your IMS. You can again take an action on those. You have to give recompute 2B, which is on the face of the IMS. It will be available. Same to recompute. And all those invoices, whatever additional action you would have taken, whether rejection or acceptance will sit in your 2B. What about the IceGate portal import credits? No, IceGate portal credits will not come as of now in IMS. It has no impact. It will straight away come to your 2B only. These invoices will not come and sit in your IMS portal. Or these credits will not come in your IMS portal, including ISD credits. Now, as you all seen that this IMS has been brought to make it more interactive between the recipient and supplier. Now, before the GSTR 1 filing was one-way traffic, whatever supplier files used to come and sit in 2B. Now, to make it more interactive between the supplier and recipient, the IMS system has been brought in. Now, there's a question, one more. Siddharaju has asked whether we need to upload from billing software to GST portal, same like invoice, GSTR 1 filing. I did not understand. Maybe what Siddharth is trying to ask is whether we need to upload from billing software to GST portal like invoice. I mean, the uploading of the invoices will happen just like normal, how it would happen, like generating an e-invoice. Based on that e-invoice, it will go and sit in the IMS portal of the recipient. There's one more question. As IMS pick the invoice date, go as usual. Need to do for October month 3B. Yes, sir. Since although it is optional, but for October month, IMS will start picking up the invoices, which will be filed in November. And you will start getting on a everyday basis. You will start seeing the IMS getting updated with the October invoices. Although the system is still in process, but they were saying 14th October around on which post which you will be able to see all the IMS invoices flowing in the systems. Recipient will have the opportunity to avail the credit in future, right? Yes, yes. 100%, Mr. Ganesh. Even if you keep any invoice as pending, right, that will remain in IMS till next year, November 16 for timeline for you to take any action, and it will remain in the IMS portal. And you will have the right, and you can avail the credit during this 12 plus 9 months period. We have few more minutes. If anyone wants to raise their hand, maybe ask the doubt, we can unmute. So yeah. So now what we are planning is based on the once the implementation happens on this IMS, right? There will be few more changes which we are seeing on the IMS portal. So we may soon do a follow-up session based on the whatever changes happens in IMS portal, because whatever we have said today is based on the information which is available and based on our discussion. If now, as we know, as we have seen earlier, also because of practical difficulties and various representations which go to CBIC, IMS will change. There will be certain changes happening in IMS, and we will very soon after the, I mean, maybe in short, we will also have one more half an hour short session, maybe to attend those whatever changes have taken place. There's one more question. When the supplier portal is expected to be ready, okay, what are the features you can expect to be there in supplier portal? Same. Now, in the supplier portal, you'll get to know what all invoices have been rejected and has come back to you, or what all basically for the rejected invoice is where the supplier portal will be more useful, because on these invoices, the recipient is expecting some action from you. Now, based on that, you will have to file your GSTR 1A if there is any real change which needs to take place on the invoices. Now, when the supplier portal is expected to be ready, because both has to go together. It cannot be like recipient portal they will release first and not supplier portal. Then the objective will be lost. So we are expecting this also to be available together, maybe near around, around 14th is what we are expecting. So we are there for a few more minutes. So I thank all of you for taking out time and being and attending this session and taking interest in these kinds of modalities and systems which the GST is bringing in. And yes, I think Abhinay has asked one question. Just Abhinay, one moment. Huh? So, and if assuming whatever questions you have asked, we have tried our best to answer it. Assuming if any question comes up during your implementation or during your working, feel free to write it to us on email. We will definitely get back to you. Abhinay asked, since the credit note cannot be kept pending and need to be accepted or rejected, what is your opinion in getting a CA certificate evidencing the reverse? This is okay. Since the credit notes cannot be kept pending and need to be accepted or rejected, what is your opinion on getting a CA certificate evidencing the reversal of ITC on the credit note? I think you're talking about the recent circular where they have mentioned that for whatever credit notes or but why do we need a CA certificate for evidencing a reversal of ITC for a credit note? That will not be required, right? Because this is mainly the systemic provision which they have allowed for you to take for you to reject a credit note or accept a credit note. So I don't know what is the question exactly regarding the CA certificate. Maybe you would want to ask the question. I can unmute you, Abhinaya. Narayan, can you unmute Abhinaya?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yes, madam.
Yeah, as you rightly mentioned, there was a circular quite some months earlier on, reversal of for any kind of reversal of ITC, you should get a CA certificate evidencing that you have reversed it. So, since all the credit notes are now tracked properly, because you can't keep the credit notes pending, you have to either accept or reject. The department is anyway going to get the information about the ITC availment of invoices and ITC reversal of credit notes. So, do you find any relevance of the circular now? Because that's a huge process also. Getting a CA certificate or ITC reversal on all the credit notes is a little, it is obviously a humongous task. So, do you feel any kind of relaxation would come in the future for this certificate circular, especially? Is my question.
Yes, understood, madam. Now that circular was more specific around the discount. Number one,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
any discount provided and whether the credit note reversal of that around the discount has happened or not. And that was mainly to entertain or mainly to tackle the GST departmental audits.
Okay.
Whatever the departmental audits which were going on, there were a lot of, it was difficult for the officer to identify the reversal portion of it. That is where the circular had come in to clarify that issue. Now from 24, 25 onwards, I think this issue will not be there for the departmental audit level. It was specifically for that purpose.
Okay. Okay.
Not for your ongoing from 24, 25 onwards, but till your 23, 24 and till mid-September, whatever discounts and on which the reversal have happened or not, the circular was particularly trying to attempt or clarify to the departmental officers for that reason.
But anyway, it is our responsibility to get a CA certificate, right? So now I thought now all the credit notes are being streamlined, because now you can they'll definitely come to know, the supplier as well as the recipient will definitely come to know what is the position of the credit note and what is the position of the ITC we are claiming or reversing on it. So I thought whether there will be some relaxation on that part. Let's see how it goes in the future.
Perfect, perfect. This is for going forward. See, IMS, whatever you're seeing is all for going forward from now on, from October or maybe
I
from
get
Jan
that as
25
well.
onwards.
Yeah. Even that circular was prospective, but they can ask for previous periods also, is what has been
It
clarified,
is for
right?
previous
Yeah.
periods only for your
Also.
departmental audits. It is for previous periods only.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Now, there's one more question. Nagi Reddy sir has asked, what about we booked input, but we are not received the input reflecting in 2B? Where will we show this amount? No, this record itself is not appearing anywhere, right? So it continues to be an unreconciled item in your books. So I thank you everyone, and I hope it was value adding for all of you. And do write back to us if you have any further doubts or clarification. We will definitely try to revert to you as soon as possible. Thank you everyone. Thank you so much. So we are closing the session now.